Hit the red
That's
light.
it, you're done.
Oh, no, the red light is on.
Yeah.
Now you get to edit this part out. All right, we're here to talk about federated search with Drupal, Solr, and React. I'm Ken Rickard. I work for Palantir.net. I was introduced as a sponsor. I will tell you now, this is not a sales pitch. It might sound like one, but this is free open source software, so there's nothing that I'm actually selling you. So we're going to talk about the product that we built, where it came from, how to use it. I'm going to give you a quick demo. I have all these things on my slide. I'm going to talk about why we built it. I'm going to show you a demo first. Originally I was going to do the demo at the end, but I decided let's get to the fun stuff early. Then I'll show you how the application is actually built, and then I'll show you how you can start working on it. So, pretty straightforward. I'm Ken Rickard, I said before. I'm officially the Director of Innovation at Palantir.net. We're a full-service consultancy out of Chicago. We do design, development, strategy, all kinds of things. I've been working in Drupal for a very, very long time. And if you look in Drupal 7's maintainers.txt, you'll find my name eventually, along with a lot of other people. So I'm a core contributor. I develop a number of different modules. I'm also now on the diversity team, sort of, where I try to do some mentorship for new speakers and some other stuff. So yeah, project overview. How many of you either work in higher education or work with higher education clients? We have a number of them at Palantir. We do a lot of work with the University of Michigan, in particular the medical school at the University of Michigan, and Go Blue. Yeah, that's the big thing. A couple years, actually, after we did our first project with Michigan, they changed their colors a little bit to darken them up. Just a little tweak, kind of fun. So, University of Michigan comes to us, again, long-standing client. Our buddy Paul, who I've been working with for like 6 years, comes to us and says, here's my problem. I have half a dozen Drupal 7 sites. I'm about to launch 2 more Drupal 8 sites. We have this blogging platform we're getting ready to do, and I want to be able to search all of those things from a single set of results. And oh, by the way, there's no guarantee of a common Drupal architecture. There's no guarantee of common data structures. And the thing that we really like is Google. And we were using Google products for that, the Google Search Appliance, but that got end of life. This thing no longer, it still exists, right? Everyone remember the Google Search Appliance? Yes, you could buy Google and stick it in a rack in your server farm and run it for yourself. They end of life this last year, so they don't sell it or support it anymore. So the University of Michigan was like, well, we were using this and now we can't.
They didn't replace it either.
They have now. There's actually Google Cloud, right? So there are two things. There's Google Site Search, which is their Google hosted thing where it was like private to you, but crappy. You remember? Those two things have both been deprecated. They're at both end of life. You can do Google Cloud Search now, but there's costs and things associated to it that I don't really care about, and it's not open source. So this is the big problem that we saw. Not just at the University of Michigan, but we could see a number of our university clients coming to us and saying, hey, we were doing this and now we can't anymore, so what do we do? And the way they talk about it is what they call unified search. And what they need, and this is sort of the project outline, just a simple way to store, retrieve, and parse content. They need cross-platform search application, this whole D7 versus D8 problem. The first thing that happened was Paul Linkowski, nice guy, calls me up. He's like, hey, here's the problem. Is there a way to fix this in Drupal? And I spent like 2 days running Drupal 7 and Drupal 8 locally and saying, well, can I feed these 2 different sites into the same Solr index? And the answer is, well, yes. And from there, we were like, okay, I think there's something here. They need a speedy, usable, and responsive front end, a flexible, extensible, and reusable model. That's important too. And then this sort of drop-in replacement for these products that don't exist anymore. So, yeah, let's just show you what it actually looks like. This is me running the local dev environment that I will show you how to set up later. You can get started and just start playing with it. This is actually Drupal 8. This is the Umami demo profile, which comes pre-populated with content, which is really nice for our purposes. And I have done a great search for soup. And there's a couple of pieces of soup in here, which is nice. And you'll notice over here on the left, we automatically get some facets. And these facets are, again, this is the problem of I have content from two different sources, right? A Drupal 7 site and a Drupal 8 site. The Drupal 7 site doesn't have umami on it, so it doesn't have recipe content types. It doesn't have the tags that the Drupal 8 site has. So there's a couple of pieces of data that are very uniform, that are easy to do. That's the site of origin, quite clearly. Content type is pretty easy. Date is pretty easy. And I'll tell you, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. Out of the box, you're guaranteed to get those three filters. Anything else is a little bit extra, and I'll show you how and why that works a little bit. But you can also then, we have like dietary needs. Show me just the vegetarian stuff. Now, what's interesting is if I go in here and I say, well, these are only the D8 sites because since I said, tag vegetarian, the Drupal 7 site doesn't have that tag. So if I'm on the Drupal 7 side, actually, then I do the same search and say, hey, only show me the D7 results, you'll notice two of my facets disappear. And you'll also notice this is really zippy, right? That's because this is just a React application, okay? This is entirely, I'm jumping ahead, this is entirely independent of your Drupal installation. This is a drop-in single-page React application that we just wrap in a router callback and display. So we'll get back to that in a little bit. So does everyone get sort of the fundamentals of what this is? Right. And we'll have time later if we want to go through questions. But this is essentially what they were asking us for, right? Hey, I've got 5 or 6 sites, want to be able to commonly index and then get uniform returns. So let's go back to the fun part. Well, the talky part. So it's a 3-part solution, right? Solr on the back end, Drupal also kind of on the back end. I'll talk about that in a minute, and then React. So the 3 things that we'll talk about here specifically. Solr is actually pretty straightforward. I assume most of you work with Solr or have before. Solr does expect a uniform schema in order to give you consistent results. Solr is pretty smart. It does provide schemas. It will also create new schema elements on the fly. So what we did, it's interesting. We actually did a UX test first to see what elements need to be in the search results and what needs to be in the filtering. And then we came up with essentially these sort of standardized things that we expect to see in the index in every case. So what's the title? What's the date of the article? What's the type? Does it have any terms? What image preview should we show, if anything? And hey, what's the HTML look like? Yeah.
So that's like the normalization of the search data.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the entire, and I'll get to this, the entire puzzle, the only thing Drupal really does in this is normalize the search data intake, right? So yeah, what we did is we came up with like, hey, how can we make sure you can see these JSON responses? You get this SS federated title, SS federated type, et cetera, et cetera. So these will be constant. And Solr is nice to use for this stuff because it knows how to handle JSON objects. Guess what likes to eat JSON objects?
React.
React loves to eat JSON objects. Yeah. There's actually an existing library for this, the Solr faceted search React, which did about 80% of what we wanted to. So I give credit here to the maintainer. We forked this and then improved the parts that we needed to improve on. You don't need to write this down because it's the repositories we use are not reliant on this anymore. But it was nice. It's one of those open source things. This is MIT licensed. It's like, oh, we can just start using it. So it's a drop-in. So yeah, the existing library had the components, but not the design elements that we needed. This is like literally what it did. But it, again, great proof of concept for things. But it doesn't handle things like images, and it didn't do some of the advanced filtering that we were after. And then again, I mentioned this earlier. We did some usability testing around search components and how people use the faceted stuff on the left-hand side, just to make sure that we're building something again that is a drop-in, right? Because the challenge becomes, hey, this is going to be the interface for the entire medical school. Right, and so we have to make sure that these are pretty well done. Our forked application, I love it. We call it the forked application. The biggest difference, I think, between our version and their version is that it's designed to be extended, it's designed to be skinned. There's some pretty simple stuff in the way the React application is built. I'm not going to dive into the technical details there, but these are the things we're expecting to return from the search query. The templates use very, very common markup that can be enhanced actually with a single CSS file. So essentially you get a working application, and if you add your own unique CSS file, you can go in and say, well, I just want to change the way these search results look. And this is all semantic markup. It's really nice. It's really, really clean. So what is Drupal? So we have the Solr part done. We have the React part done. Solr indexing, again, it's a working application. The big problem is how do we get stuff into Solr, right? And Drupal, of course, has good and advanced tools for this stuff. I will tell you a secret. We actually don't need Drupal in this equation, right? The thing that I just showed you, again, it's a single-page React application with a search box, totally independent of the CMS. The only thing we're using the CMS for is standardizing the indexing, and we're only doing that because we didn't really have the time to build a crawler that can do it for us, right? But if you had a crawler that could standardize and normalize data and shove it into Solr, you don't need the Drupal part, right? If you had a WordPress indexer that could shove data in a normalized way into Solr, you can add WordPress to it. It's, again, the Drupal part is what we prefer to work in. It's what our client is using, but it's not actually required for the application, if that makes any sense. So in the Drupal world, again, like I said, this is the template. The template literally, if you went to like Jesus' talk just now about using Gatsby and things like that, we don't do a lot of decoupled stuff. We do a lot of sort of tightly coupled stuff where we're embedding JavaScript applications inside Twig, and that's all this does. Because if you've worked with React or with Vue or anything, really you're just saying, hey, this is where my application should be inserted, right? And then it just runs. So very, very simple stuff. Drupal does make our life a lot easier. Again, two basic pieces you need. Standard Search API. Everybody uses Search API, knows it, loves it. Yeah. Knows it, uses it, understands why it does what it does, maybe. And you need a local Solr server. Just for testing. Any Solr server we're actually using, well, I'll get to that in a little bit, but anything above Solr 4 will work fine, essentially. So what do we do? This is where I love working with a team. So I'm sort of the product owner of all this stuff. So I know what it's supposed to do, but I don't know how the implementation was actually done. This is actually fairly brilliant. What they did is they looked at things like token, right? And said, well, what if we just abstract the data we want out into fields that are then programmable? Right? So what the Federated, there's a module called Search API, Federated Search, yes, that creates the fields that we showed. It's like, here's what we need for uniform indexing. And then what they do is they say, let me see if I can, yep. How would you like to map the data for this instance of Drupal? Right, so this, for instance, is the map of content types on the Drupal 8 install for the University of Michigan. The reason this is interesting is, let's say you have different content types on different sites, but you might call it a general page on one site and you might call it standard page on another site. You can have them both indexed as general, and then they'll be treated like the same thing in the Solr index, which is good for faceting and filtering. So it lets you, again, normalize data that isn't normal. Make sense? You can also, let me make sure that I did this the way I think I did. You can also insert tokens here, which is a lot of fun. There's a token browser, just like using Path Auto. Right? So you can go in, this is the date field. Like, hey, tell me where the date field is for these content types. Right? So you're not just forced to use creation date or updated date. The published date is used very specifically on one of these websites. So it'll let you say, here's how to understand my data. And again, this is the kind of thing that's kind of hard to do in a crawler. I would love to do it in a crawler if anyone has experience with that. But if you did a crawler, you'd have to have like a config file for all of your crawls that says, oh, here's how you parse this flavor of HTML because of the discrepancies. So this is just, again, a shortcut, right? Because, again, we're standardizing and then importing. Preview images work the same way. Like the page content type has no images in this case, but everything else, in this case, we created its own image derivative. What are those called? Image styles, right? So we're pulling a specific image and running a specific style processor on it, so that we get everything in a uniform way, which is nice. You can also tell it what name to index. This is the site name is kind of weird about how it works, so you can put in a user-friendly title for things. This also happens if you happen to be using domain access, which is something that I write and maintain. And it turns out that University of Michigan's D7 sites are all running on domain access, so they have to do fancier mapping for the domain names on those. Again, some fields are uniform across sites and very, very easy. Right? So if you're looking at types, those are going to come across, again, pretty straightforward. And type is always going to be present in all cases. Taxonomy is where things get a little bit tricky. You can't quite use the same token-based replacement logic for taxonomy terms because of the problem of synonyms across your different sites. And I'll show you what I mean by that here in a second. So if you actually try to go into the Search API configuration and say, hey, let's do the taxonomy stuff, it gives you this big note that says, yeah, you can't do that here. You have to do that in the taxonomy management screen. Now, again, some big organizations are great and they actually have a standard taxonomy. That is great. That is also incredibly rare. So what you end up with is a case where on each individual term, if you want faceted search by term, you go in and map it to a uniform global taxonomy. Now, this is entirely optional. You don't have to do it. I'll give you a secret. On Monday, we're about to start doing this for the state of Georgia. And we only have to do this for their D8 stuff. We don't have to do it for their 88 existing Drupal 7 sites, right? Because that would take like a month just to figure out what the taxonomy is supposed to be. And they don't want to wait a month while we figure out with their team what is the uniform taxonomy for every single government service in the state of Georgia. And then, by the way, how do we map every single taxonomy term you have across 88 websites to that new standard taxonomy? If you would like to do that, we give you a tool for doing it. And it's very literally, you're just setting the hierarchy up. This is a bit hacky, I will admit, but it's sort of the best case we could come up with. So if you're setting up a new site, you'd want to figure out, or a new series of sites, you'd want to figure out, how am I doing global taxonomy? The easy way to do it, I would suggest, is have a standard taxonomy, search taxonomy that you install for everything, right? So you could have, like you'll have your normal tags that you use for navigation and other things. Then you might have a search taxonomy that is uniform across every site in your installation that has the same mapping. But if you don't provide any mapping, it's not going to do anything. It's just not going to index these fields at all. So, questions about that?
So, in the taxonomy part, would you, if you have existing sites, would you go back and create new taxonomies, like the new parent taxonomies, to kind of build that normalization of data? I probably wouldn't, and the problem becomes if you create a new taxonomy, you'll have to create a new field on all of your existing content and go update every piece of existing content. I would probably take the time to figure out how to script this, right? I know exactly what I would do. I would literally make a giant spreadsheet of all my existing terms and the mapping that I want for them, and then figure out what kind of update hook I have to write in order to read that CSV file and make the changes. The big challenge is going to be that building that spreadsheet, right? And getting the editors to agree on. Have you ever dealt with like taxonomists and librarians? I used to work for newspapers too. Like librarians really care about this kind of stuff. It's really, really hard. So
You could do it, again, you could just create a new, here's the search hierarchy. But again, then you have to write a different kind of update script to add the field and add the metadata to everything. This is one of those cases where I wish we had a crawler, but how the heck do you crawl a page for taxonomy terms? Yeah, so kind of messy. So yeah, Drupal provides indexing, a search page, callback, and this little search block up at the top. That's really it. Right? So when I say you don't really need Drupal in this, it's actually true. So yeah, this is the fun part. This is the how do you get started. I don't even know how we're doing on time. We have tons of time. We have 20 minutes to get through everything I had to show you. And if we want to spend time walking through the demo stuff and configuring things, we can. Otherwise, you get free time. I'm okay with free time. So we have a federated search demo project. This is an open source GitHub project. This will download our Mac development environment. This is a great bone of contention among developers. We use these tools. So we use VirtualBox, Ansible, and Vagrant. A lot of people use like Docker and DDev, and those, we don't use those things. You can probably run this on that, but we don't support that. But if you can actually download this, and if you have these things installed, you can run a couple of commands, and the demo that I just showed you, you can have up and running locally. This will pre-install Drupal 7 and Drupal 8 and dummy content into both sites. Right? It also comes with the following things. Search API Federated Solr, which is the main module. Search API Field Map, which is the piece that uses the tokens. Search API Field Map only exists in the Drupal 8 version because we didn't have time to port it to Drupal 7. Search API Field Map is interesting because, again, as a product owner, when I'm looking at it, you might want to do that for other reasons than what we're doing. This idea of, hey, I want to normalize my data, even if you're not using our app. So in the D8 side, we released that as a separate module. So if for any reason you ever want to say, index this thing as this thing, there's a module for that now. And then Federated Search React, this is the fork repo from the one I showed earlier. So this is the actual application. So when you download the test box or build your own, you'll build it with these pieces. Again, Drupal 7 and Drupal 8, we're using an Ubuntu release, we're using Apache 2, 5.7, PHP 7.1, and I'll point this out. We actually test against Apache Solr 4.5.1 because that's what Acquia supports.
What's that end of life 5+ years ago?
I don't know, but this is, as far as I know, what's supported. I will point out that the University of Michigan stuff that I showed you actually uses search stacks. They're running like Solr 6.3 or something crazy like that. Search stacks is just a cloud-hosted Solr and Elastic search application. They were at Drupalcamp Nashville. They have a nice product. I can recommend it. But we have to test against Acquia stuff because that's where most of our search clients are.
Could be worse if you're on Palantir, it's 3.5.
Yeah, and I don't think it would work on that. I'm not sure. And it's going to be really...
Search API doesn't work on it either.
It's going to be real fun because, well, starting Monday, the state of Georgia is on Acquia, and they're asking us to implement autocomplete and what would you call it? Editorial selection of suggestions, editorial suggestions. And it's not clear to me at the moment if we're going to use the suggestions API in Solr, which might not be available on this version, or if we're going to write something more custom. I'm actually leaning toward doing something more custom because I like to have editorial control of things. So my vision is to basically write a Drupal module that says, okay, if someone searches for this term, what nodes would you like to recommend, right? And then every site in the network can say, hey, pull my recommendation results either from this remote source or from my local list, or from both, and merge them together. I like that as an editor. I like it as a developer too, because it gives me some more control over things. And I did do some research. It's not clear to me that the recommendation API for Solr is nice, but complicated, and might also involve configuring schema, which is kind of hard to do on hosted search applications. Although search stacks will let you do it. You have to go through their support, but they'll let you do it. So yeah, questions. I can do, like I said, it's the first time I've done this version of the presentation. It took 25 minutes. So we have time for questions. I can walk you through how things work. You can go get some work done, go get a jump on lunch. I don't care that much. Yeah.
Does the React application make a direct call to the Solr API, or does Drupal proxy it? Or?
No, there's no proxy whatsoever. So React, that's why I say Drupal's not necessary. Just if you're at Jesus's talk, he's like, after this point, you can turn Drupal off, and you can do the same thing here. So yeah, the React Solr app makes direct API calls to your Solr instance. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's possibly troublesome, right? Because normally you lock it down to the IP because it's pants down to the internet.
There is a security layer in there somewhere that I'm not clear on, but this was a thing that came up, and it's one of the things that the development team had to go hit early, which was, okay, how do we make sure that doesn't happen? We're not creating this open proxy, whatever. Yeah. So there is a security layer there, but I'm not.
People go around just zeroing out your indexes if it's open.
Yeah, no, the index. Oh, so no. So the Solr app, the React app is read only. So the React app it's just requesting data. It can't write.
Yeah, but if you've got the API open to call your Solr, then one of the things you can send on a URL is zero out my index, delete my index, please.
Yeah, that's going through the normal search API Solr integration.
No, straight to
stuff.
Straight to Solr without any Drupal in. You can just type it into the URL.
Right. If it's not locked down.
That's what I was asking. We lock that down quite hard normally.
Yes, we have locked it down in some way that I am not smart enough.
Okay, yeah,
but I did not prepare an answer for
that. Because normally we lock it down just to the Drupal side, so everything goes to Drupal space.
Yeah. No, this was one of the people on the team. I actually have the team on the next slide, which is great. I forgot Luke's name. Luke Wirtz was on this project too, and was Luke's first question. It's like, how do I prevent this from happening? Right. Yeah.
Being at UOM, and I know working with some of the React and working with React, people with disability and how you tab through is not necessarily as simple as it should be, right?
Right.
So do you guys have to do you guys run into any issues with using React in that way on top of a page using for people with disabilities?
That is a good question that I'm also not entirely prepared to answer, except that I know that our contract with the University of Michigan requires all of our work to be 501 compliant, 508 compliant, and so it should work fine, but it does require JavaScript. I think the question would become what happens for people who are using screen readers, and I don't know the answer to that question.
Because we have problems with that working with the Field Museum in Chicago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that is another interesting piece. Like the markup is semantic, that should all work fine. Like tabbing things should work fine, but yeah, with screen readers, I don't know a good answer to that question. That is a worthwhile question. If anyone wants to, we're going to probably have to dig into that for the state of Georgia also, right? So if it becomes an issue, because they're going to need 508 compliance for everything that they do. So important. Other questions that I can't answer? Yeah.
So you mentioned indexing content from various sites, Google sites. Have you had to integrate into that other content from maybe other content providers or anything like that? Have you got any requests about that to try to have more of a sort of a Google-like search for content over other providers or anything like that?
We haven't had direct requests for it, but we architected for it. So long as you understand the schema that we have, again, we're looking for about 8, basically there are 8 common fields that we're after, and if whatever your data source can feed Solr those 8 fields, then yes, we can plug into whatever you want. So if you wanted to do a WordPress plugin for this, It probably, I don't know what the state of WordPress Solr search is, but it probably wouldn't take very long, and then you could do it. Yeah, if you have like a manual indexer, just again, if you go back to, I'll go way back to, which slide was it? It's real early. This is all we're looking for. Right, this is all we're expecting. And like most of these things are pretty straightforward. Anything can these are the sort of hard ones. Right. And really the only one that's difficult is this one, this federated terms concept, where we had to create our own sort of shorthand syntax. But yeah, anything you can teach to index to Solr, this will work.
Is there also any need to re-index or any updates that need to be made? Like if there was any content that's being indexed that is no longer relevant or deleted or anything like that, is there anything that handles that? Yeah, so in the Drupal world, that is all handled by the Search API stuff. So Drupal has tools for managing updates to the index, and we did have to test that. This was actually one of the first things we did. Like, one site can't delete content that came from another site. So,
Subset it. And to subset it.
Yeah. So they're I think that's all coming off the site string, actually. So they're essentially different subsets in the collection. That was the big thing. Is normally if you're doing Solr for multiple websites, you'll have different Solr collections for each. We just have one collection, but each member of that network is responsible for indexing, index updates and deletes of its own part of that collection. So I'm fairly confident, I have to double check, that if you say, purge my index, it's not going to purge the entire index. Fairly confident.
With it being read only and not needing Drupal, is it locked down to, so can somebody else create a React app on their own website that would search Michigan's stats? Yeah.
That's very related to the question that came up. I don't think so, but I don't know how we're passing the credentials.
Yeah, there's no OAuth, there's nothing, it's just open.
I don't think that's right. It's not open, it's not OAuth, but I don't know how we're passing credential strings. We could go look at the code and find out.
Is that part of the
Yeah, it's all open.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that would be in the like, go way back. I apologize. That's gonna be sitting in this repository here, Federated Search React, because that's going to contain the API calls. And if you find out, by the way, that no, it's not protected, then I'm going to be very embarrassed.
But that's just,
And there goes the rest of my weekend.
but it's just a read part.
But it's just read, yeah.
That's
Yeah.
sort of the point of an API is moving things up. I mean, someone could, if React can call it, then I think someone else can make their own.
Also, they
But I
can
think
make
at the
their own stuff
Solr,
into it.
but at the Solr level, you can restrict by IP also, which actually is what the University of Michigan is doing. I know that for a fact because every time we started doing local development, we'd have to open a ticket for search stacks and ask them to open a whitelist for certain IPs and or domains. So generally that happens at the server level. Search stacks will say only accept requests from this domain or this array of domains. Right, and because that was a problem for us, because we'd go in and say, oh, now I want to use steve.local, because we added Steve to the project, and we'd have to go get an exception, right, so that they would respect that. That ought to be in the documentation, and I'm going to make notes that I have to prepare that. I'm giving this talk again on Tuesday night. And it's like, okay, I need to prepare accessibility and security, then I'll be okay.
Well, Solr used to have a little bit in it, and then they just took it all out. And they said, we're not even going to try your DevOps guys should secure this. We're not going to do our own.
Mm-hmm.
We're just...
Yeah, so part of my answer to that
You
would
guys
be,
do it.
yeah, that's up to Acquia to however they secure it. That's what we're trusting. And again, search stacks is by IP, or by domain. of
Yeah.
requests. There's also,
Or key pair,
yeah, there is the keep. I'm pretty sure we're doing key pair stuff too. There is a lot of, there is some cores configuration. I know you have to do some cores configuration on local, which is part of the React app too, because you're making these cross-site API calls. Yeah.
Kind of both a question and a connection. I hope you have an answer for it, but if not, maybe a solution for it. Smart Logic has a product they call Semaphore, which deals with federated terms,
Yeah.
federated tagging. They offer all kinds of services for, you can have multiple agencies, and each agency uses the same common term, but they can actually put their own spin on that term and change how it appears on their agency.
Right.
But they also have an auto tagging thing too, where you can actually send content into it, and it comes back with all the things that should be tagged.
Nice.
And this just arrived on my plate recently that
Some
build in some connection to that.
Yeah. There's also a company in Canada that just launched essentially the same thing with a crawler in front of it, and it's now just a hosted it's a drop-in replacement for Google Site Search. It's like, hey, we'll do it for you now. So that's why
Business opportunity there, right?
there's a huge. I will be. Yeah. Again, it's funny. It's like we open sourced it, right? Because we've been in the Drupal community for a very, very long time, and that's what we thought was right to do for our clients. There is a huge business opportunity here. I had conversations with the Search Stacks folks back in Nashville at Drupalcamp. And they're like, yeah, we don't want to be in the front end business, right? And they're like, if you come to us with a product, we'd be happy to partner with you on that kind of stuff. So it's really fascinating. And I'll be honest, we had an internal conversation of what happens if we try to spin this up as a business. Well, number one, we got to hire 3 employees and a salesperson. And that's not really what we're built to do. So that's not the business for it.
Oh, it can be an add-on?
No, it's a service. What we sold to the state of Georgia is essentially configuration. So, hey, we're going to go in. Actually, we're going to make these enhancements to the product for you, and then we're just going to configure it and show you how it works, and then it's all yours, right? Because that's the business that my company is in. We're not in the hey, we're going to create a search empire business. It's not that. It's just not what we do. Any other questions? I appreciate everyone's time and attention.